Welcome to the Mold Matters podcast. Whether you are looking for help recovering from mold illness or just want to learn more about creating a safe environment for your family, this podcast is the place for you.
Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of the Mold Matters podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Evans, and I'm alongside Mike Adams.
Hey, Jer.
How's it going?
Great.
We're excited.
Hang on. We have to announce.
What?
Jeremy is a
yeah.
father.
Yeah, it's true.
As of 48 hours ago.
Yeah.
Roughly.
Yep.
Baby's doing good?
Baby's doing well. I'm 41, and this is my first child, so I'm becoming a father a little older than most. But yeah, it's awesome.
Mom's doing good?
Mom's doing healthy.
Baby sleeping through the night and getting up and getting dressed on her own?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Life's
easy. We're sleeping a lot.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. It's just that first day is tough.
I was a little worried doing the podcast today because my mind is, I haven't slept a ton. And so hopefully I'm coherent, Olivia, for our guest, Olivia.
I did tell him that get some sleep the night before she delivered because you will never sleep again for the next 10 years.
Yeah, there you go.
And we
no
ought
more
to
beauty sleep.
Yeah, we ought to introduce Olivia a little bit here as well. Olivia, we've gotten to know her a little bit through Dr. Pompa and his programs that are helping people throughout the world, really, to heal from mold illness. That's definitely been one of Olivia's, as well as her father, Dr. Pompa's. It's your father. Yeah, I should have said that. Speaking of fathers. And we've brought Dr. Pompa on here before, but he's done a lot of work to help people. And Olivia's got a really neat story. And that's kind of something we'll do on this podcast occasionally, Mike, is we like to help people hear stories, real stories of people who are either healing from mold illness, have healed from mold illness, and learning from insights, because it's quite a vast, there's just so many elements to healing from mold illness. And so I think the more stories we share and hear, people who listen can glean from those and maybe pick up one or two things, that help them on their healing journey.
Yeah.
So what, Olivia, welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I feel so blessed.
I guess technically we should say Dr. Olivia Pompa.
Dr. Pompa number 2. No, call me
right.
Dr. Olivia, because my dad's Dr. Pompa.
Okay. So we'll go first name, Dr. Olivia.
Dr. Olivia. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Thanks, guys.
You're more distinguished than we are. So first of all, we want to hear your story. So we'll start with that, Olivia. And then we're gonna probe on a few things, and then we'd love to learn from your medical expertise as well.
Yeah.
So tell us your story.
Yeah, well, in a quick summary, I do want to kind of tie my story into Dr. Pompa and how I got well from mold illness. But, long story short, when I was 7, I lost my parents to a tragic murder-suicide. And I had a twin brother at the time that had just been placed on the autistic spectrum as well. And at the time, when we were very young, we were living in Florida. And so you can imagine in our home, we had mold, and it was black mold, actually. It was growing on the windowsill in my brother's bedroom, my twin brother. And, when I was 7, I lost my parents and we were taken in by the Pompas. So Dr. Pompa is my second father, actually. Yeah. And interestingly enough, I didn't realize until later how much the mold had affected me as a child. But I grew up severely sensitive to mold. And I didn't realize until later when my father kind of started to put it together, as a child, your crib was in a room with mold. And, of course, healing from mold illness became a really, really big part of my healing journey and my own twin brother's healing journey. But at a young age too, I saw the ability for the body to heal with Dylan, my twin brother. He was on the autistic spectrum, as I said, and within 2 years of my father working with him, after taking us in, Dylan was released in a normal school system. And
Wow.
so I think that, God allowed me to remember all of this so that as I got older, I became very passionate about a self-healing body. If we can identify these stressors, mold is a fantastic example, and we remove it, I strongly believe that the body can heal. And so, going back to my sensitivity to mold, though, I mean, growing up, my health issues didn't come till later when I actually hit my head in a car accident. But leading up to that, I mean, I couldn't walk in a house that was moldy or a building without getting this severe fibromyalgia pain in my knees.
Mm.
Severe. And so that was always a sign because I would get home from school, for example, and I had been in the library, right? Which we
Yeah.
know books can have
Right.
mold, right?
Yep.
And I would tell my dad my knees are just killing me, and we would both know I was in a mold exposure.
Mm.
So yeah, came from a place of a lot of emotional pain, adopted by the Pompas, which is exactly what I needed, right? With all the right minds and health minds, and began my healing journey with Dr. Pompa. Of course, he coached me when I hit my head and I got really sick. And it wasn't until later when I was living in Atlanta when I had actually gotten a lot of my health together. I had really gotten a lot healthier. I was living in an apartment in chiropractic school, and I was probably the healthiest I have been in a long time because I had done a lot of upstream work. And I was in a moldy apartment for like 2 years. And then all of a sudden, I started plummeting again. And so, what I tell some of my patients is mold, you sometimes, in some cases, it can be what got someone sick, right? Or it's part of their perfect storm. We say chemical, physical, emotional come together and their bucket tips over and they become very ill. But sometimes it's not what makes people sick, it's what keeps them from getting well. So in my case, it wasn't what made me sick, but even after I got well, it was what kept me from getting well in the future. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
does.
So,
That's
Wow,
amazing.
that is crazy. So, are you still? You mentioned the fibromyalgia knee pain.
mm-hmm.
Do you still sense that when you go into
Oh,
molded
yeah.
facilities?
Yeah. My symptoms now, and I think this goes back to when I was a child and just having multiple mold exposures throughout my life that were, I didn't know about them until I had been symptomatic enough.
Yeah.
Now I have louder symptoms. I'm way more sensitive to mold than I probably was when I was 15, 16. But yeah, when I was young, I mean, it would be brain fog and knee pain. That was it.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was loud enough that I knew.
So, medically, is there a reason why, because you've seemingly got out of at least the severe mold that you grew up with, is there a reason
Yeah.
why you've become more sensitive? You'd see it. I don't know. In my mind, I'm thinking, well, you got out
Mhm.
of it and you're healing and doing
Right,
all these
right.
things. You should be
Mhm.
less sensitive. But
Yeah. It's a good topic. And my father's always our theory is that, and he came up with this theory because he too dealt with this, where even though he was getting very healthy, he would still have really sensitivity to mold and some chemicals, right? And we believe there's a connection to the limbic system, which is your emotional side of your brain, right?
Mm.
And so, your body might sense it and emotionally creates this symptom that you once had. I strongly believe it has to do with that.
Mm.
So I do believe in neuroplasty. I think that you can retrain the brain to get away from that. And so there are things like brain tap that work to kind of retrain the brain to not be so sensitive in that way. So I think it does come down to the emotional side as well, and just what you felt before. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with your dad about, well, as weird as it is, we were talking about dust, and
Mhm.
he was talking to me about the, is it the amygdala?
Amygdala. Yep.
Yeah, and that's the part of your brain that senses, okay, I've got a problem here, right?
Yeah.
Or there's
Mhm.
something serious going on here.
Right.
And what he told me makes a lot of sense. He said, Look, there could be something in the amygdala of a person that has had mold exposure
Right.
where even the sense of dust, which maybe once had live mold on it, now just the dust itself could kind of send you into a state of panic. It's really
Right.
interesting to think about it that way, but it kind of makes sense because, we've often talked for years, not to get off the subject, but we've talked for years about, we don't believe dead mold can make you sick. But there's always those very, very sensitive patients that
Mm-hmm.
we still may need to do a complete wipe down of the entire house,
Right.
to get them over the hump. And I think your dad's theory is probably dead on. It's,
I agree.
even though the mold is dead, the dust is still there,
Mm-hmm.
and your brain senses, man, last time I encountered that much dust, I got really sick.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then you
Yeah.
mentioned the DNA too might still be intact. And can your body maybe sense that as well?
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know if that's true or
Right.
not.
No, it's, and honestly, it is a theory, but out of all the patients that we've worked with, it just seems to make the most sense.
Yeah.
And so, and as my father and I, we both did a lot of that, brain work too. We've gotten a lot better at being able to put yourself in low grade mold exposures. Not that we want to be, but if you're ever in a situation where you can tolerate it more, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's a really interesting topic for people that are recovering from mold and they feel like they are super, super sensitive, that, hey, there are other avenues to explore. Mm-hmm.
Well, that emotional side is intriguing. I'd like to go into that a little more because, I mean, you talked about, sounds like a really not pleasant childhood you had, and then your concussion.
Yeah.
We have alluded or mentioned this a few times in the podcast, but maybe we can go into this a little more. Oftentimes, and we've seen this many times, where someone is exposed to mold, but our bodies are pretty good at, for the most part, detoxing on their own, and it is often that secondary event that comes in, right? Like some kind of really strong emotional event, a divorce that, and then right after the divorce, all of a sudden, these symptoms start showing up, or it could even be like you said, something like a concussion or something else that weakens the immune system.
Yeah.
So is
I
that,
call it the perfect storm. So something, 3 stressors, and they don't have to be all, chemical, physical, emotional, but there can be 3 stressors that come together. And all of a sudden these people get very sick, because as humans, hormetically, we should be able to, if you understand the principle of hormesis, which is applying a stressor to the body should be able to adapt. Right.
Yeah.
But when there's too many stressors, the body is just going to be overwhelmed, right, essentially. And so that's what we call the perfect storm. So mine actually was heavy metals. My mom was a dentist, so she, you receive a lot of heavy metals from mom in the womb. Also tons of MMR shots, which are one of the highest vaccines in mercury. And so I was a mercury case, my dad likes to call me. Emotional trauma, a lot of emotional trauma growing up, and then of course mold. I believe that was my my perfect storm. But yeah, that's exactly what you're saying.
So healing then has got to be multifaceted as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you talk about that? So is because you're helping people heal from mold, it's generally not just get out of the mold and you'll be fine. You've got to probably do multiple things, right?
Yeah. And so this is everything, I give credit where credit is due, and everything I've learned is from Dr. Pompa and his process, which is incredible, and not only helped my life, but many and thousands of others. But yes, you're right. And what I think a lot of functional medicine doctors miss is that they just treat the symptom, or they just treat the one thing, mold detox, for example. But if you understand that every single person has a full bucket, and that bucket has been filling their whole life, until finally maybe that mold exposure or that divorce or that perfect storm is what tips that bucket, and all of a sudden it's overflowing and these people are just unexplainably ill. So what our process is initially understanding what is in that person's bucket. What are all of those stressors? And can we start by removing those stressors in the first place? So mold would be a big one, a source that, hey, you're never going to get well unless you get out of that. And then we can detox from mold as well. But again, mold might not be the only thing. It could have been heavy metals. It could have been emotional trauma as well. And so in our process, we target it all of it. Because I do believe that people become less sensitive to mold as well, not only the emotional brain component of it, but as you remove from this bucket, you should be able, as a self-healing body and adapting body, to be able to add a stressor to the bucket without becoming so symptomatic. Right. So in our process, I coach clients one-on-one. I will teach them about heavy metals. I will teach them about mold using very, very strong binders and certain short chain fatty acids that help pull the biotoxin away from the cell membrane, circulate out of the body into the gut where we catch it with binders. But yes, so we tackle it all. It's a big
That's
part of it.
amazing.
So I have a kind of off the wall question, Olivia.
Yeah.
You find that this affects women more than men, or not necessarily?
You mean mold?
Yeah, yeah. Because it
Not necessarily. Why do you ask?
just I've remediated thousands of homes, talked to thousands upon thousands of people. It just
I
seems
gotcha.
like it usually is the housewife or the mom more than the dad,
Yeah,
and maybe
that's
even the kids
interesting.
or
Oh,
and I've always thought, here's my two theories on that.
mm.
One, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, because I'm certainly not a doctor. As we talked about before, I'm a fun guy, but I'm not a doctor.
He's a fun
But
guy.
I'm a fun guy. But mold toxins want to attach themselves to fat cells. Is that correct?
Yes. Just
Women
like the
typically have
myelin sheath, right?
right.
Mhm.
Women typically have a higher
Buddy.
body fat content than men, so maybe that has something to do with it. My other theory, and this is probably what it really is the mom's in the home much more than the dad. And
Yeah, I
maybe
couldn't
that
agree more with that,
comes, it comes down to
honestly.
that. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think those are
Yeah.
both really big thoughts. I think it could be multiple factors.
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is threshold, understanding threshold. I
Uh-huh.
think women just in general have such a lower threshold for many things, honestly.
Yeah.
I also think women are just more emotionally charged too.
Yeah.
So
Sure.
that could probably set that threshold at a different level.
Yeah.
Yeah. Emotional piece.
But I think the women being in the home more is a really big thought. Yeah, that's big.
And yeah, maybe that's changing nowadays.
And this is a big topic too. It's like, we talk with some of the big mold experts in the world, and I think one of the coolest topics is not coolest, but in terms of awareness is, when you do work with these clients, right? There's always the woman is so sick and the man seems to be okay.
Yeah.
Right. And we're finding, such an increase in divorce, of course, but I do believe that in some situations, the man doesn't necessarily believe that the woman is having a lot of
We
symptoms,
see it all
right?
the time. Every
I
day we
know.
see it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in terms of awareness, this is really important that, women need to feel like they can still speak out on how they're feeling and identify if there's a problem. Because a
Yeah.
lot of times, the males have this much higher threshold for it. And
Yeah.
so they're looking at her going, oh, no, she's just crazy. This is all in her head. And how much division that can create in a relationship. Right. And so I
Yeah,
think
we
that's something
actually
to talk about.
we have a couple that actually bought a license from us to do what we do, but they credit us with saving their marriage. It was that
Wow.
bad. I won't say who it is just to protect them, but he thought she was crazy
Yeah.
and she was just deathly ill, and he couldn't
Yeah.
figure out what on earth was going on.
Mhm.
And as soon as we got them out of that moldy environment, all of a sudden their relationship kind of turned around, and they said, "We need to be a part of this." But
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and let's take a commercial break here in just a minute. But you mentioned your brother, your twin brother, having kind of autistic tendencies, correct?
Yep. He was, yep.
And I've heard in those more severe cases, we talk about, maybe on the softer end, sinus and lungs and breathing, but on the other end, is there an association between mold and mold toxins and something like autism?
I do believe. I think it's, bucket theory. I really do, especially with mold attaching to the myelin sheath and loving fat. I think can absolutely affect the brain, as well as heavy metals, as well as environmental stressors from mom. But, I do think that there can be a huge, especially if the baby is born in that environment and it's there for a long period of time. I really do believe absolutely that it's connected.
Is your brother doing well nowadays?
He is, but he's still sensitive to mold.
Yeah.
I think that going back to the bucket theory, if you don't work on unloading your bucket completely over time, you're going to stay sensitive to mold. And in his case, that's that, right?
Okay.
Not 100% committed to everything that you need to do, but he is doing really well. But definitely you can tell when he's in a moldy situation or low grade that he gets a little worse.
Would you still say there's the autistic elements in him still, or have they kind of faded away as long as you
No,
stay
I would
out of
say
mold?
they've faded. I mean, if you met him today, you've never met Dylan, right, Jeremy? Mike? No. Yeah,
I think
no.
I have. Yeah, I think I
Oh,
have.
you
met him.
have?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's just a little introverted, that's all.
Yeah.
But you would never think, honestly. And that's
No.
what,
Yeah.
the work of detox has done. Truly. It's
That's a
amazing.
miracle. That's amazing. That's
Wow.
an amazing story. Okay,
Thank
let's take a quick commercial break, and then I want to probe more a little bit about the emotional side, because that's something we haven't really talked a lot about. So be back in a sec.
Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Olivia Pompa, a cellular detox and hidden source specialist. I work with thousands of unexplainably ill people looking for real answers to their health symptoms. I can be reached at info@droliviapompa.com, where you can apply for my coaching program. I'm excited to hear more about your story.
Order your air filters through Pure Products with the February Filter Frenzy Sale. Get 20% off all filters that are pre-treated with an antimicrobial agent, creating a healthy environment for you and your family. Visit mypureproducts.net and use promo code FILTERFUN20 for a discounted and pre-treated filter today.
Okay, welcome back. We're here with Dr. Olivia. She is the daughter of Dr. Pompa, and I can already tell just from the way she's reasoning about mold healing and mold illness that and I knew this beforehand, but she's very astute and knows what she's talking about. So hopefully our listeners are learning from her wisdom. I've already captured a few gems just from the 20 minutes we've been here. And something that's been piquing my interest is that emotional aspect. And I want to ask a question. Is it possible that someone, does all the right detox? They get the mold out of their homes. They get, they start detoxing with the proper binders, which is a whole thing in and of itself. It sounds like, I mean, you can't just do any old binder. Are there people out there who aren't healing because they're not healing the emotional aspect? They're doing everything but that? Or how does that play
It's so
into it?
amazing. Yes, I love that question. Even the way you phrased it was perfect. I have to share my story. I'm really open book about my health journey, really. And this was a huge part for me. I had gone after the chemical. I had removed the mercury from my body. It took me years to do it, but I did it. I healed my brain from my concussion, a lot of amazing water fasting, empowering my body in that way. I detoxed from mold as well. I unloaded my bucket, as I talked about. But the one thing that I didn't do, and I think because I was in denial that I needed to do it because of all the trauma that I had been through, I came out normal. That's what people say, right? People kind of looked at me as a 7-year-old, going through what I went through, and they thought I was going to be nutso, right? Or not turn out okay, right?
Yeah.
Also with my twin brother, they never thought he was going to be okay, right? And we ended up being the opposite, thriving, right? And, later, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. But yes, wait, what were we talking
The
about? I'm
emotional
sorry.
side of
Yeah.
it.
Just the emotional side and how.
You can heal by doing everything but not
Right.
rectifying.
Well,
Yeah. And so that was the one thing that I didn't do. And I was in denial about it. And I just wasn't healing. I wasn't getting better until I started doing the emotional. And so it really was a really powerful component in that. And I became less sensitive to mold. Right.
When
So
you did the emotional work.
yes.
What does that look like? I mean, you mentioned kind of limbic system.
Yeah, I think it's different for everyone because I believe in chemical, physical, emotional, spiritual. I am a Christian, and so I work with a Christian counselor. So that's really big for me. I also love brain tap that helps retrain the brain, which can be really big for the limbic system and neuroplasty, right? So there's also other things like EMDR that's really incredible as well.
Oh, okay.
Dr. Olivia, do you know about, I don't know what they call it, but I did a session with a friend of ours that was a neighbor. She just had me blink, and she would ask me these series of questions why I blink. It was really weird, but it was one of the most emotional things I've ever gone through. because
Huh.
she would ask me questions about my past and, you
Mhm.
know, but she would tell me, blink it out. And
Huh.
I know it sounds crazy. Sounds
No,
absolutely
it's
crazy.
like tapping.
But
There's
is that what it
another
is? Is that what tapping
yeah.
is kind of?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's retraining the brain. Literally,
Okay.
it's yeah, it's amazing. I think there's so many different routes. I don't know all of them, but
Yeah.
absolutely, it's
Yeah.
all neuroplasty. It's retraining the brain, creating new neurons. Hmm.
It was crazy. I just started crying like
Really?
uncontrollably. Yeah.
Wow.
It was
No way.
really bizarre. Yeah.
Did it feel therapeutic?
It did. Yeah.
Afterwards?
It did. I probably need to do more of it, but I kind of freaked out and I'm like, I'm not going back there, you know.
I don't want to cry. Yeah, when we talk tapping, is that EFT type stuff? Is that
Yeah.
EFT? Am I getting the
Mhm.
right acronym there?
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I've done some of that in the past for
Mhm.
this. So this is more like, yeah, I guess this is more not psychology, but yeah, psychology in a sense, right? This is more the
Neurology.
classic
Yeah,
neurology,
neurology, yeah.
psychology.
Yeah.
So fascinating. So yeah, so you've got tapping, you've got EMDR. So as you did those things, it sounds like that was kind of the missing
I
link.
actually haven't done EMDR. I really want to. But I started because I'm a strong believer in the emotional and spiritual component playing a big
Yeah.
role together. That's really important for me as a Christian to make sure that as I go into these other realms of emotional healing, that I'm staying aligned. And so I personally started with counseling. And spiritual counseling as well. So a lot of Christian work as well. So that was my starting place. And the next thing I will be doing is EMDR.
Oh, interesting.
But I also love Brain Tap. That's a really cool one as well that you can purchase them and have them at your home and use it a lot. So
Oh, it's something you purchase?
yeah, it's if you go to like braintap.com, it's this little set. And you can buy it, use it at your house. You can rent it from some naturopathics in the area, like biohacking places. You can lend them out. But yeah, that's a really good starting place too for people that want to tap into the emotional, but maybe aren't ready for counseling or maybe can't do EMDR for whatever reason. And so Brain Tap is a good starting place too.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so with your dad's program,
Yeah.
you obviously work with every day. Do you guys kind of tailor the program? Is it different for every person? I guess that's my question.
It's very different for
Okay.
everyone. In case I just had a case, I would say one of the most complicated cases this year that I worked with. And, I don't want to say too much here, but she was so severe. I mean, her symptoms were so unexplainable. And I almost didn't know what to do with her, honestly. But what I do know is if I can go upstream and I can identify these root causes of inflammation that's driving inflammation on the body, if I can find them, I can remove it, the body can actually start to heal. And so even when I get these really complicated cases, I don't get intimidated because I know what my treatment plan is and what I'm going to go after first. And mold is one of those. I always make sure in these extreme complicated cases that mold is not in their environment. She always said, I just, for the past 2 years, when my symptoms got so bad, I had gone online during COVID. And so I thought, oh my gosh, well, she's spending all her time in her home, right? Back to we talked about earlier. And so I go, you know what, we got to get your house tested. So she did. And sure enough, she had low level. So it was more moderate, but more low level mold in her home. And I told her, I think this is what's keeping you from getting well. It's not what made you sick. We identified your perfect storm, right? There was more of an emotional and a physical component for her journey, but we got her out of it. She slept for the first time in months in a hotel for the first time. And, I think this is really important too for awareness in that, hey, your tests might come back that there's such small amounts, right? That you might not, the person working with you might not recommend treatment, right? Or your naturopathic doctor might get a certain test back saying, no, there's no mold. It's just small amounts, but it might be enough that's overflowing your bucket. And in her case, it was. So.
Well, and we've talked about this often, but if you knew mold testing, like we know mold testing in a home, it's really hit and miss. you know?
Yeah, it can be massively inaccurate.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you're saying that, because sometimes I think people, because we're mold professionals, they think we're just saying that.
I know.
You
It's
just want to
true.
treat
You
our
just want
house.
you
Yeah.
want to you want some
Yeah.
work, but I'm
Right.
glad to hear it from someone like you on the
Yeah,
medical
and
side.
I had another experience with that too. And I'm no like mold test expert, but I do know enough going through it myself. And I was staying in like a rental in California during my postceptorship for grad school.
Mhm.
And, I knew there was mold there because my knees were killing me.
Mm.
Right. And so I told the rental person, hey, you guys do need to bring someone in here. Like, I'm leaving, but you guys
Did you
are going
explain it
need
to her like
do-"
this? Did you say, look, my knees hurt, so you need to get the mold out of here?
I can't. They'll think I'm crazy. It doesn't make any sense to them,
Yeah,
right?
I know.
Everyone's symptoms are different, right? And anyway, so he ended up bringing someone in to test the air, right? And the guy
Right.
came in, just sticks it in the middle of the room, and I was like, no. You need to
Yeah.
find the source and get closer to the source, right? I was like telling this guy how to do his job,
Yeah,
basically.
I know.
But yeah,
Well,
and I think
I was going to say the other thing about that type of test where they just test the air for spores in the air. Well, I'm a firm believer that sometimes the most dangerous homes could be homes that the mold is happily growing and not sporing. So they're putting out toxins like crazy, but not sporing. And you take a
Right.
test and you think, oh, that house is safe because there's no spores in the air. Well, no,
Right.
that house could be more dangerous than a house that's sporing like crazy.
Yeah.
Just because of the
Exactly.
toxins. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
agree.
interesting.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm glad you shared that as a medical professional about
Yeah.
testing, because we're spending lots of our spare time is spent talking to people that are coming up with new testing methods and
I know.
investigating how to do it better. I mean, we always say this, it really boils down to, doing a really good, thorough, kind of like you were saying, really thorough, good visual inspection,
Yeah.
interviewing the person about the history of the home,
Yeah.
talking to someone like you who if a medical professional is saying, your symptoms align really well with mold. And then I loved what you said about that person who went to the hotel for one night and could tell a huge difference. I know your dad's mentioned that many times.
Honestly, I can say this, having consulted with thousands of people. If I always feel better when when I go on vacation, and people always think it's because they're getting their toes in the sand.
Yeah.
Right. But really, and it could be, right? There's definitely benefits to taking work off and having an emotional disconnect. Right. But when people say, yes, when I travel, I feel better. That's my first thing that I go, oh my gosh, you could be in a mold situation.
Yeah.
In your professional experience, is it ever anything else besides mold if they're leaving their environment and they feel better? Have you found any other toxins?
It could be allergens, depending on their histamine response to certain allergens in the air. So if they're going from like a really humid place, which I would still think mold, because there's mold outside too. And really sensitive threshold people, that could be too much. And maybe they're traveling out west where it's dry. It could be air allergens, couple factors to include. But if they're in a humid place, I'm usually thinking mold. Yeah. And mold at all is going to hypersensitize their body to multiple allergens, right? Including food, right? Because their body's already in a cellular danger response mode. Hey, help me, right? Everything becomes a stressor.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. You're a wealth of information. I'm so glad we had you on here, Olivia.
We might need to do it again.
Might need to have you back, because I mean, on that very topic, we've looked into other VOCs and other contaminants in the air, and really have just never found a strong correlation between, this home is making this person sick and anything else besides mold. I mean, occasionally, there are some things that, EMFs and things, like formaldehyde and some chemicals,
flame retardants, new furniture,
bacterial stuff going on. That's
bacteria,
not, obviously not fungal, but bacterial stuff in the home. But
usually if it's really, taking someone's health out, like just absolutely demolishing their health, it's usually something more severe than EMFs I've seen, at least in my experience. I don't know if yours is the same.
I agree. I really do agree. I think the human body has a capacity to adapt to small stressors, right? But I think mold is huge. And I think mold is one of those big stressors that you have to remove. And it's usually what keeps people from getting well.
Yeah. And you mentioned, the bucket several times. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess EMF, VOC, formaldehyde, allergens, I guess those are all part of the bucket, right? So,
Yeah. Right.
whether mold's the main one or not, you still probably have to address some of those other things if you want to.
And I've always had a theory that you can kind of adapt to one type of mold in your home, maybe. But then when another mold comes in for whatever reason, like say you've got a lot of penicillium or aspergillus in your home, your body seems to be able to adapt in most cases to that. But then say you have a sewer backup in the basement or something, and now you've got the aspergillus and the exotoxins or whatever that's coming off of that bacteria. That kind of creates almost a war in your environment, And I've always felt like those are the worst cases where you kind of have two different things environmentally going on at the same time.
Well, do you think that could be because it's, they're fighting for territory and so setting off more of a biotoxin, right?
Yeah, I mean, that literally is why mold makes a mycotoxin, is to try to protect its own species, right?
Yeah.
And
That's an interesting thought.
Yeah. So I've always felt like when there's two incidents that cause two different types of mold, or a mold and a bacteria or whatever, those seem like the most toxic homes to me.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You brought this because that's where we talked about mold gangs.
Yeah, right. The molds and the fungs. Yeah.
That's great. No, that's actually so thoughtful. So if you see, so would you think if you saw a test and you saw multiple levels of mold or multiple types, you would be
multiple types? That's something. Something's not right.
Well, and like you said, bacteria, which you don't test. Bacteria doesn't aerosol, or at least it's hard to measure aerosolized bacteria.
The exotoxins or endotoxins. Yeah.
Any toxin's really hard to measure. So you don't always, like with sewer, it's often mold and bacteria. And so it's really hard to, it all boils down to, it's hard to really measure what's going on. But you're saying a couple water incidents that create two different mold scenarios.
I felt that
toxic.
I think I first shared that theory with somebody probably 10 years ago.
So you've had it for a while. It's held true.
I think so. Yeah.
It's interesting.
But
it's
either way, I guess it's all kind of, it doesn't matter. The home needs to be treated.
Yeah. You gotta rectify the home.
Gotta fix the home.
Demold it, demicrobe it.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'd like to, we'll kind of wrap up here, Olivia, but two questions. One, where are you at in your health journey now? You kind of mentioned it, but where's your life now?
Yeah. Good question. I lived in Puerto Rico for a year, and, when I first moved in, I think it was a different type of mold. I think it was so low grade, and I had come from such a place through emotional work that I was less sensitive to mold. I really, really was. And so when I first moved there, I felt great. I honestly didn't have all these symptoms until about 6 months in. I started getting symptoms again. So I do, like I said, if you can unload that bucket, you can become less sensitive to mold. But I was living there for about a year before I really realized how severe it was for me. And it was one of those cases that the level was low enough that no one would consider treatment. But it was enough for me. My threshold, I believe, because of past mold exposures I've had, it was enough for me. Yeah. So I got really sick again, right? I was well, but it was what was keeping me from staying well, so to speak, right? Yeah. And I realized, as much as I didn't want to leave, I had a really strong emotional connection to the place as well. I knew every time I came back home to Park City and was with my family, I felt amazing. I felt way better. And so I finally just had to listen to my gut and say, I need to get out of this source. And I did. And I've been out now for about 3 months and healthy again. Yeah, so, my sensitivity to mold is still there right now because I believe I just got out of that source and I'm still healing, running myself through detox, my typical process to unload the body of those toxins, those biotoxins. But I do believe in the next 6 to 8 months, I'm going to be back where I was. So,
wow. Yeah. And Puerto Rico's pretty humid, right?
Yeah, it is. And, the hurricanes, it's tough and a lot of water damage. And, something I learned is mold can grow on concrete. Didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So
You can grow on it. Well, I mentioned this to Mike the other day. I have one of those flossers. What do you call them?
Water
the
picks.
water
Water
picks.
Water
Yeah.
picks.
Yeah.
And
Did
I
it
hadn't
smell
used-
inside?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
that thing's made of plastic. Plastic is
know.
not a great food source for mold. And I didn't use it for, I don't know, it was a few weeks. I just was doing regular floss, and water sat in there, and all of a sudden I went to use it, and I'm like, oh, this tastes like mold.
Yeah. I know.
Concrete. I mean, a lot of times it's forming on the dust on the
It's a biofilm forming or whatever
on
the side of that.
concrete or on the plastic, but still
Yeah, a lot
really
of
it's
coffee
water.
makers. Yeah, even this morning I was gonna do a coffee enema, and so I was making coffee out of the coffee maker thing, and my dad reminded me, make sure you clean the water thing before you do that, right? And I pull it out and it smells a little musty, and I'm like, those are things people don't think about. Where water sits, mold can grow. And especially if you're using something for a health reason, right? Like a lot of water filters, people don't clean them. Right. And so I think those are things in terms of becoming less sensitive to mold, healing from past mold exposures, we have to be more on top of.
Yeah, that you just reminded me. So next topic should be coffee enemas.
Yeah.
She mentioned.
Yeah, we should. Yeah.
That's definitely something we haven't talked about.
We'll have you back. We have so much
Okay.
we need to pick your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
And my final question is, what's your suggestion to someone who is suffering from mold illness, or they think they are? And you can advertise yourself too. We always give our guests.
Yeah, this is hard because I've been in that place where you're so emotionally connected to a place that just leaving isn't an option, right? Selling your home, you wish you could just burn that house down, but you can't, right? But truly what we teach is my father, it's his 5 R's, and R1 is remove the source always. So I do believe you have to remove the mold, right? And then of course, Pure Maintenance is awesome because of their fogging treatment. And so we recommend them many of my clients. You're welcome. And then once that client is out of the source, okay, then they can actually start to use detox, which is what I take my clients through, is cellular detox, mold protocols using certain binders. But like I said, going back to the bucket, it's not just 2 things, right? You have to confront all of it. And so that's really how you can get people well again, and really truly healing from mold is by unloading the complete bucket. So
and so how can they find you? I know you're actively helping clients.
Yes, I do take personal clients. You guys can email me to apply at info@droliviapompa.com. That's what I recommend. Yeah.
Awesome.
And I happen to know my wife, Tony, would absolutely recommend.
Oh, thanks.
Well, that's
Dr. Olivia. Yeah.
I love Tony. She's so great.
Yeah.
She is the best.
We need to link up soon.
Yeah, that's right. Tony definitely speaks highly. You guys have worked together for a while now, right?
Yep. And one of my father's coaches, Tom Landon, was just at my house knocking on my door, but I was busy and I couldn't talk to him. But he has an incredible mold story. I'm sure you've had him on here.
Yes, we have had him on here.
In fact, Tony and I just took their family to the Jazz game a couple of nights ago. We had a great time.
Yeah.
That's
he's
great.
in America again.
Yeah. We're Americanizing the guy.
We're trying. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're getting close.
Well, thank you so much,
guys.
Dr. Olivia.
Yeah,
this was so fun.
I learned, and I'm confident the listeners will learn because there were some good gems in here. And so reach out to Olivia if you need help healing, and we'll hopefully have you back again. Thanks so much.
Yeah,
She's the best.
So.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Blessings to you. All right.
You too,
Thank
as
you.
well.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the Mold Matters podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more in-depth information on mold illness and recovery.